Hello, thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel, Reverend MeeLing. Reverend MeeLing, Reverend Susan MeeLing, Susan MeeLing, Lady MeeLing, Lady Dori, Belle. I've been known by a few names, that is what it is. So, my biological sister, despite the fact that she did not go to the same locations, she didn't have to defend herself. She had Mike and Anna, or Mommy and Daddy, to defend every little thing that she did. It didn't matter. I mean, obviously I've discussed in prior videos how it didn't matter what occurred. I was blamed for anything and everything she did. By a lot. And so, that's just the way it was when growing up. Now, in the state of Texas, after they moved to the state of Texas, meaning my biological mother, my biological sister, my biological father moved to the state of Texas, I had warned people. About that. My now dead ex-husband, when he was alive, he saw it as an opportunity because he already knew certain aspects. He had various contact with my biological sister in certain regards, and that is what it is. Point being, though I did not hide anything, I can't. I am not a ninja. I'll mess up on memory, like numbers. That's both the memory issues from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, as well as having gone from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math, which my biological mother, biological sister, and biological father did mess with. Their idea of fun was the three of them telling me 3 different stories just to see what I would do. And so, after several years, it took several years for me to realize that my biological mother had told me something, then went inside to my house in San Antonio, and then my biological father told me something different. And then when I would ask, my biological father would say, "Oh, that's just your head injury playing tricks on you." Then, if it was a switched aspect, then my biological mother would say, "Oh, that's just your head injury playing tricks on you." My biological sister, same thing. But at the exact same time of them telling me that, they'd also then say, "Oh, you're just letting what you were told get to you." Which, by that time, mind you, I hadn't actually understood the memory issues. I hadn't had the words for that yet. I hadn't even had the words for the cognitive issues or disorder yet. So for them to say that back then, it's one of those, no, I know these things. Now, I had actually also asked my biological mother about a few memories that I had from before my head injury, which in a specific manner, I'm referring to a particular babysitter that I had as a child growing up until my biological sister was of a certain age. And initially, my biological mother said, "Oh, that's just a false memory. You don't know what you're talking about." And then a few times later, because of course I forgot I had asked, my biological mother got infuriated and then started crying, like, for no actual reason, just an excuse, because why can't you just, forget that? probably because it made a really big impression, don't you think? So, did this happen or did it not? And it was actually after the final separation before my biological mother actually admitted to that whole aspect of the babysitter. It took that long for her to say, well, we just got a better deal. So you put me at risk up until Patricia was born and was of a certain age. And then I was told that I was overreacting, that I was upset for no reason, according to my biological mother for that. Now, I highly doubt that if, a good mom or a good dad had known of that immediately, then that would be a very different outcome, extremely different outcome. Most likely I would guesstimate. Like, for example, if my bucko had found out about that in full, that guy would not have been my babysitter. That's for certain. I have a feeling on that. I would guesstimate that by a lot. So, in regards to my scuba diving, now I had discussed with the individual that I was dating at the time, but he didn't want anybody to know. Whether that was because he was embarrassed of me or whatever, it is what it is. That's past stuff. Point being, I did discuss it with him. I know exactly where I was sitting. I know exactly which chair he was sitting in. I know exactly what happened that particular night. I cannot tell a lie. I did discuss certain aspects. Whether or not that individual wants to tell the truth is his own issue. That's realistic. Because that particular night, my daughter came out of her bedroom and I had to take her back to her bedroom because we were eating dinner, which my son and my daughter had already eaten. The guy showed up afterwards. My daughter knew that somebody was coming over, and so she tried to be all ninja and tried to be all covert. She got my son's binoculars and was not a ninja. And so I got her into bed and, tucked her in, read another story, that sort of thing. It's just how I am as a mom. At least back then. I mean, I'm obviously still a mom, but they're older now and I don't do that because they're not living with me, obviously. So, plus one is turning 18 and one is turning 19 this year. So, in that regard, that would be one individual that was informed as soon as I got back to the state of Texas. And the end of the relationship was then because of whatever issues in that regard. That stuff is realistically not that important in comparison to what I'm going to discuss. So, in regards to the scuba school I was going to, and I was volunteering at, I was asked about that, discussed that, and the response I got was, well, if you went with a different scuba, like if you had actually gone through us instead of like whoever you went through, you wouldn't have had to deal with a bad diver in who you were assigned to. Now, the irony in that regard, because of the Cozumel trip, nonetheless, and not that it was a bad scuba trip at all, just realistic aspects and aftermath issues. And so, whether that was believed or not at the time, in regards to when I discussed things at the scuba shop, is what it is. I did discuss it with Anthony, as well as I think her name was Jennifer. And, you know, they were just kind of like, you landed where? And they already knew about my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. They knew I could not tell a lie. They knew about my headaches and migraines and why I had gotten into scuba diving as well. So on and so forth. And so they had asked a whole bunch of questions. And, you know, like, are you okay? Was one of them. It's like, yeah, you know, I'm breathing. You know, I'm breathing. That's, you know, doing what I can, how I can, as best as I can, so on and so forth. And, oh, okay, well, you know. Yeah, no, I don't know how he didn't see you at the bottom of the ocean. I don't know. I don't know. Oh my God, Susan, I had no idea. What? I had no idea. Oh, that's right, you got all those certifications. Yep. Makes so much sense right now why you said you were only willing to do a certain amount of dives before you would consider making a trip to the ocean. Yep, gotta make sure I know my stuff. Oh, yeah, oh my God, okay. Okay, so it was about a month and a half, maybe, between the Vandenberg dive and then going to cavern training for my cavern certification in Peacock Springs in Florida. And I had discussed with multiple scuba divers about all that. Although I have a feeling that my scuba instructor, both of them, but the one in particular that was in charge of Garland's store, I have a feeling he was not told about that at all. I have a feeling that trip out to cavern scuba diving is when he learned. I think so. I'm fairly certain. And so, you know, my biological parents and my biological sister were involved in my life at that time. We hadn't stopped speaking yet. And so, while my biological sister was absolutely disgusted because, you know, I look like I do, you know, she looks, you know, Asian, whereas I look as I do. You know, she has the normal long hair and I look like I do. She, you know, going to college and doing all that stuff, and, you know, all I had were, you know, my scuba diving certifications at that time, and, you know, what big whoop-de-doo was that, you know, compared to her getting her bachelor's degree and then master's degree, you know, that were her words, not mine. And then, you know, I thought it was important, but, you know, I was told it was not. And, you know, not just by one or two people either. There were multiple individuals. My ex-in-laws at the time were like, well, you know, how big is a Navy ship? And it's like, I don't know. I know it's a boat. I know that. I know it's a boat. It's called the USS Vandenberg. Well, it's a boat. They didn't see me. Saw me when I descended. And then they saw me when I ascended. But they did not see me when I was down at the bottom of the ocean. I don't know why. Who knew? However, my ex-great-grandmother-in-law and my ex-great-uncle, or how is that? Because, like, in-law, right? Because technically they're my ex-in-laws, but it was my dead ex-husband's grandmother, so that would make her my son and my daughter's great-grandmother, and his Uncle Tony would be my son and my daughter's great uncle Tony, if I'm not mistaken, and I discussed that with him. And he was in the Marine Corps back in Vietnam, and he was just, what did you say? And I was like, yeah, can you, have you ever gone scuba diving, great uncle Tony? And he's like, I'm gonna go to my room. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm gonna go outside and just kind of walk around. Oh my God. And I was like, what? So, and it's not like I also didn't discuss that with my ex-sisters-in-law, both Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen, as well as Susie Marie Nichols Lopez, when I was in Florida, as well as my ex-brother-in-law, Tony Walker Nichols. I spoke with all three of them because they were the ones, all three of them called me to get me to go, because, while I was in Florida with my son, my daughter, and my niece, could have done that when I was in Georgia with them, but that was too much of a hassle for my ex-sister-in-law to go to Alabama from Georgia. I think it probably would have been an easier trip if I'm not mistaken. However, that is what it is. And so all three of them knew. All three of my ex-in-laws, as far as like immediate siblings to my dead ex-husband, they all knew. And while Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen probably didn't know, maybe she did, I don't know, she lived in Georgia, and Georgia is near, the ocean somewhere, and so maybe she saw a ship or not, I don't know. Her husband, though, I'm sure he probably, if she told him, probably would have known a lot better in comparison to her. By a lot, him having been in the Air Force. That I would guesstimate that. However, I discussed that when I was in Florida, in Boca Raton, when not only getting back from the Vandenberg dive in the Florida Keys, I had discussed that with multiple people. I had discussed that with the hotel clerk when I had extended the stay. I had discussed that with multiple individuals in the island area. I had discussed that with, when taking my son, my daughter, and my niece to Boca Raton for the last portion of the trip, or back there. I had discussed that particular aspect on the phone, outside smoking, because you can't smoke inside that particular resort's hotel room or whatever. And so outside in the common area, there were people in the pool, there were people in the parking lot and stuff. And the only reason why I know that is because when I was discussing that I had landed at the bottom of the ocean, when at the Vandenberg, I heard a bunch of people drop a bunch of stuff. They're just like, what? And I was like, oh, I don't know what's going on over there, but... So I have no idea how many people actually knew in Florida before I actually wound up in Alabama and then back in Texas. That's like, I know at least 5 people. I can't count that high. I know there were more than 5 people, though. I just can't count that high, realistically. So, and that doesn't include, like, all of the scuba divers on all of the different ships that were out there to go scuba diving, plus all of the dive masters, plus all of the captains, all of them. And there were at least 10 ships out there when I was out there. There was at least 10 of them. And each of those ships, they were pretty close to the size of the Starfish Enterprise I was on. So there was at least 20 or 30 different scuba divers on each one. And I have a feeling they heard me when I yelled at them. the guy who was assigned to me. I have a feeling, I don't know who they were, but I have a feeling they heard me yell at him. I do. I think so. I think so. And then, like, you know, the radio call from the ship that reeled me in when I surfaced, you know, then there was probably, like, somebody other than the Starfish Enterprise who heard that radio call. And then I have no idea who those guys would be. And so, you know, a couple of people. I can't count that high because, you know, I only know the number 20 or 30 because of, like, looking at the list when they were going down the paper to find my name to check me off and check me in. And they were all numbered. So that's how I know. I learned how to speed read. And so... and there were more numbers after my name, so, you know, is what it is. So then, you know, as far as people I knew directly, you know, my son, my daughter, and my niece immediately were told. And then, you know, at the Denny's we went to, those people were listening to me tell my son, my daughter, and my niece, as well as the waitress. And it was a crowded restaurant, so there were like a whole bunch of people in the restaurant who heard. And I only know that because of, I'd say it was body language by technicalities. So like, you know, pretend in this regard, you know, somebody's sitting, so like, here's the booth where I'm at, you know, and there's somebody on the other side, and I'm, you know, talking with my son, my daughter, and my niece. Person over here, you know, oh, and then, you know, I landed at the bottom of the ocean, and I'm looking up to the top, just tapping my foot at the bottom of the ocean, and I hear, you know, and it's like, well, I know what it's like to have twitchy hands at times. I realize now that person might have heard me. Because that person was not the only person who did that. In that Denny's. So, you know. And then, on the way back from Alabama to the state of Texas, I don't know how many gas stations we stopped at and talked with a whole bunch of different individuals. And that GPS trip back to the state of Texas was not the same trip that was taken when we went to Georgia. Because we went through Tennessee and I didn't understand why we were going through Tennessee. So yeah, it's just one of those, okay, well the GPS is going to do what the GPS is going to do, so we're going to follow it. At least it's a pretty drive. And so, you know, talked with a bunch of the different individuals there because, you know, I look like I do. I didn't have these tattoos. I did have from here to here and then that. And I had this. I didn't have this portion, but I didn't have this, but I had the yellow one there. And I had that. And you know, I had my hair color, my haircut. And, you know, the tattoo on the back of my neck. And if I was wearing capri pants, well then I had those tattoos showing, and then I had that tattoo, and that tattoo, and that tattoo showing. If I was wearing capris. If I was wearing shorts, then possibly Methuselah was showing, and that one, possibly, depending. And so, yeah, you know. So, you know, what was that? So that was Tennessee and Kansas. And then Oklahoma or Nebraska? I can't remember. The GPS took a really weird, like, had a bunch of issues. And so just, okie dokie, you know. Took a lot longer to get back to the state of Texas, I'll tell you that.
And so talked with a whole bunch of people at each gas station.
And my son, my daughter, and my niece were just happy to be out of the van at the time. So, okay, and, why is your hair like that? Oh, I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And then we talk and stuff like that. And they're just, so what? Yeah. And then told them about the basic training, head injury aspect, and well, what are you doing here? Was one of the question from each individual. Well, driving back from Florida. What were you doing in Florida? Oh, scuba diving. My son, my daughter, and my niece, I took them to all these different places and stuff like that, and I treated myself to 2 different scuba dives. And some of them were like, oh, scuba diving. Where'd you go? Oh, went out of Boca and in one location. Oh, okay, cool. Boca's nice. Yeah. And then where's the other one? Oh, I went to the Vandenberg. Do you know scuba diving? And they were like, some of them were like, yes. Others were like, I've heard of it. And other ones were like, I've done some scuba diving. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, have you heard of the Vandenberg? And some of them were like, you mean the naval ship? And then other ones were like, nope. And other ones were like, oh, look it up. And then I told them about that dive. And they all just kind of, where? Yeah, I was standing at the bottom of the ocean. Can you believe that guy did not see me? I mean, do you see my hair color? Now, I realized, that scuba dive was in 2009. And it is 2020, the 30th of May in 2020. And I forgot that when you descend past a certain atmospheric measurement, you lose the sight to see certain colors. So, you don't get to see red after the first ATM. And then orange at the second ATM, and yellow at the third ATM, and blue at the fourth ATM, and green at the next ATM, and green and then blue, and then purple, and not supposed to be able to see it. So, I know it was kind of dark, but then I turned on my flashlight and I could see. So, just one of those, okay, I can see. Dude, look at that. Hey, look at that. Why can't you see me at the bottom of the ocean? I mean, I don't want to waste my scuba dive. By technicalities, I guess I didn't, by technicalities. I took some really cool pictures, got to, I mean, how many people can truthfully say that when standing at the bottom of the ocean, they felt like they were being pulled backwards to turn around to see a tooth. Just one teefy. And then say, you better shut your mouth. Don't you make me defend myself. Punch you in the face. But with the regulator in my mouth and bubbles. And don't you. And then that particular, the fishy with only one teefy that I saw, shut its mouth and then go back down to the bottom of wherever in the Mafia's abyss. Probably not many people can say they did that. I did that. And then that one, there's a little itty bitty fishy. I mean, you know, his head is the size of that particular metal thingamabob, for whatever it's called for a Navy ship, that crossbeam, that frame. His head is, you know, like with his mouth closed, is from the bottom of it to the top of it. And that doesn't include the dorsal fin. Cutie patootie. And told him, you better stay over there. Don't you make me defend myself by punching you in the face. And I cannot tell a lie. So, that, I mean, technically, you know, I mean, I had my regulator in the mouth, but... And, you know, if you purchase my book, you'll see it looks like he has a little smile. Like, okay, you just want to take pictures? Cool. Just stay right here. I'll just stay right here. Cool, cool. And... Guess there's not that many people that can say they did that on the way to the surface from the bottom of the Mothius abyss. Probably not. You know, so, you know, I handled that. And, and then, you know, nonetheless, when getting back to the state of Texas, after speaking with however many individuals I spoke with back then, however many people I spoke with in regards to Carrollton, Texas, and then Clear Springs Scuba Park, and my ex-in-law, specifically Susie Marie Nichols Lopez, spoke with some of her neighbors when she was living in White Settlement, and I think that was about the, no, I'd already met her ex-mother-in-law, but had gone over there a few times, spoken with her ex-husband now, Joe, and, you know, discussed scuba diving and all that, and he immigrated from Mexico, so he might have seen a Navy ship, I don't know, and so there's a few people I discussed that with. A few people. And then, you know, then in regards to going cavern scuba diving, speaking with them there about that. And, you know, when we were talking about the Vandenberg dive, we were outside. And so there were other people in other camp cabins. I noticed that they kind of stopped speaking in their groups whenever I was talking about the Vandenberg dive. Kind of realized that now. It's a little late because I was back in 2010, so I don't know who heard me back then. And so, you know, then, you know, I told my biological mother, which, okay, maybe she didn't know what the size of a Navy ship is or whatever. But I did tell Mike. And Mike was just like, well, you know, scuba diving is scuba diving. And it's like, yeah, you know, it's fun. It's cool. And my biological sister told her. And that doesn't, you know, forget, you know, forget how many. But, you know, different people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, like in person, and then Austin, a few people, and then San Antonio, a few people.
I also did not know hacking and stalking was a thing online in that regard.
And, you know, stalking and following are different. I understand that. There's a difference between the threats and the harassment sort of thing, obviously. And so, you know, apparently FetLife has done a block thingamabob. I don't know if Facebook has done that yet. That'd be interesting. I should probably check that out. Anyway. So, you know, discussed that a few times with a few different people. And, you know, I don't know who all those scuba divers and people on land discuss that with. But that is what it is. And so, you know, hi. I do not camo. And so I talked about it. I posted pictures and I wrote my books later, and, you know, in 2020. And, you know, but yeah, my biological family knew about it. And so did my ex-in-laws. And so if they were ever questioned and asked about it, and you know, then they lied because they were told.
Most of them in person.
And so, yeah, I didn't deny that. Actually, there was a guy at Sanctuary at one point in time. It's now closed, and he came up and he was like, "What are you doing, Lady Dori?" "Oh, you know, just gonna clean up some stuff and whatever." And you know, I'd get my money out of my purse because I drink soda when I was there, and so I'd make sure to always, you know, pay for the soda that I had and stuff like that, and you know, that whole thing. And you know, need any help? Like, nope. And we talk a little bit, and you know, he had known some Navy Marine Corps stuff, and you know, I told him, "You didn't see me at the bottom of the ocean." How didn't he see you at the bottom of the ocean, Lady Dori? I don't know. Made me waste a scuba dive, though. Just saying. Although, ironically, he was like the only individual that was like, "I don't know if you really can say that you wasted that dive." Like, he was the only one who was like, "I don't know, Lady Dori Belle. I don't know if you, like, do you really think you wasted?" I didn't get to go for as long as I could have gone scuba diving. That's how I view it. Oh, okay. Alright. Because by technicalities, I mean, I didn't even use a full third or half of a tank of air. So, you know, I'm just saying, I had plenty of you know, nitrox to breathe when I was down there. I could have, but, you know, apparently the dive buddy I was assigned to didn't know how to do a free descent. So that is what it is. I can laugh at that because, you know, I know there are other people who have gone scuba diving that would be, okay, maybe they wouldn't in regard to, like, being at the bottom of the ocean, but they would very much be like, well, you know, that's a wasted dive, right? You know, not even like, how much air could have swam around, but I did not go into the Vandenberg. Didn't go in it. I followed the rules, despite the fact I had planned on it. Just saying. Just gonna throw that out there. So yeah, you know. And there were plenty of others, even like the guy at one point that I was engaged to twice when I had gotten back, and you know, oh, I need to go and, you know, get the van's oil changed and stuff like that, and you know, show up and, oh, you know, how was your trip to... Well, I had no idea. He had to tell me he was flirting with me. He told me that later. It's like, oh, I didn't realize. I had no idea. No idea whatsoever. And then, whatchamacallit, yeah, when we had discussed the scuba diving, that was when he was like, so I want you to meet, like, my mom and dad. Oh, okay. Do they scuba dive too? don't know. And so, that is what it is. And I told one guy that I had dated before the guy I was engaged to, and he kind of freaked out a little bit. But he was in the Navy, so he probably knows how big a Navy ship is, having been in the Navy. Probably. And and then there was another guy that I had discussed that with that I had dated, and he was in the Navy, and well, when we had discussed that, that had been after a few different things, so I don't know if that actually, I don't know, pun intended, if that sunk in at that time. I know, 2/3 of a pun, I don't care. Technically, because, the Vandenberg was sunk. Get it? Sunk in. And so, very few people actually ever ask me about stuff as far as that afterwards. Like when I wound up in Washington State, I did discuss a little bit with a guy who was helping with my Medal of Honor art project, Mike Hershey. Talked with him about it a little bit. Not very much, but... And then, very few other people, nobody really asked me about it. So, it was just one of those, whatever. Apparently, by the responses I got, it wasn't important. Although, I thought it was important. Like, I'm just saying, I thought it was important all those years, but, after so few individuals being like, alright, well, whatever, I think there's some stuff that needs to be looked at. I think there's some stuff that needs to be talked about and discussed. However, I'm not an instructor, so, not the same, I guess, whatever. And, it's what it is. So, though I did not hide that, that is the point. Nope. I do not camo. I mean, I camo when I have my scuba gear on. Ish. But the second I take my scuba gear off, nope. Not with where my tattoos are. Nope. Very distinctive. So, However, especially in regards to my biological family, if they wound up, no, it's not that big of a deal the way they did to me, to others, well, that's a whole other ball of wax for them, realistically. Because I did tell them, so like, for example, if, when I said that book and the other one with it, Finding a Silver Lining and Finding the Silver Lining, if Mike, my biological father, didn't really put 2 and 2 together at the time and then was like, well, it's not like I didn't tell you. And then, if Patricia did not tell her husband at the time, that's a whole other ball of wax, because that wouldn't be a surprise to me at all. Because, well, she had a tendency to not want to tell his family or him a whole bunch of stuff. I'm very simple. You literally just have to ask me, and, you'll get the truth. Though I don't like being tricked into it. I do tend to get offended by that. That I admit. I do get offended by that, because I'd rather, actually, not that anybody's asked me in regards to this particular video, it's just one of those, I don't understand why that was not, asked way back then, in more detail. But I did come up with the underwater travel system. That is a possibility. However, that is what it is. If it's really, again, I haven't been told that it's important. So, there is that. And there are things already laid down in the ocean, floor bottom, for specific routes that can be utilized. However, there are other issues in that regard that have to be discussed and gone over through with one particular individual first, and then there's the other aspects. So yeah, it is feasible, the underwater travel system, and it's not as difficult as some might think it to be. But I mean, if you don't understand that stuff, then yeah, it could be. But if you do understand that, it's not difficult at all, realistically. So, however, if that's important, just saying, I've reached out to quite a few companies. I hand wrote letters and mailed them out. However, I didn't get any responses back. And so I guess, that is what it is in that regard. Again, if that's important or not. I think it's important. However, there's a few other things that are of importance needing to be taken care of first, and that whole thing. So, that is what it is. Just saying. There's usually a courtesy when you're actually in the military or actually in law enforcement, where if you're actually in, whereas I am not, I'm medically retired. So the same rules in that regard technically do not apply to that declassification need. That technically does not apply by technicalities. And since I've discussed it with so many people and that sort of stuff, and there were those who did not doubt at all back in 2009, just saying,
not to be rude in that regard at all. Just,
I have discussed it. Never hid that. I understand certain aspects of classifying things. That, on the other hand, well, there's quite a few people I discussed that with, as well as books that I put and sent out to a few places, and
kind of like I was trying to get help for other things.
so, unless all of that was hidden this entire time, and then, other people would be responsible for me not getting the assistance for my daughter at the time. And my son. could be wrong. Nonetheless, I did put it out there. And so, you know, so apparently, you know, if it's that big of a deal, I think it is. I thought some stuff was a big deal long ago. However, you know, but sure, there's the quarantine. Sure, there's the pandemic. Sure, there's the rioting. All that, you know, takes precedence, right? Comparison just a while ago. Just saying. So, I have tried. I have made quite a few attempts. Just saying. So, you know, nonetheless, you guys have a good one. Just saying. Never hit anything. I mean, you know, literally just had to ask. So, you guys have a good one.